I'm gonna go with Microjig's MatchFit system. This is particularly appealing to me because I already have a lot of MatchFit components in the shop. I did a video with them recently on a mortising jig that came out really well, and this kit has a bunch of components in here for work holding, and my favorite thing about them, they're plastic. They're sacrificial. So if you run a bit into it, it's not going to destroy the bit, it will destroy the clamp, and you could just replace that fairly inexpensively. And I also have, of course, all the hardware, the bits, and everything that I would need to have a successful clamping solution at the CNC. So that's what we're going to go with. First thing I want you to notice is look at that grid and look closely. I have done 0 post-cutting work on this, and look how clean that is. And part of the reason is because the bit that Microjig provides has a little roundover at the top of the profile, and it just makes it have such a clean look, and that any work holding you do, it's not going to interfere because there's no frayed material here. But that's why it looks so clean. It's actually the bit itself that did the hard part. All right, so let's bust out the stuff in the CNC Workholding Kit. Let's see what Microjig has for us. All right, everything looks pretty straightforward in the manual. I'm not going to bore you with showing you the assembly of some of these little work holding and clamp dealy bobs. I'll put some together and then we'll see what they do. All right, there they are, all assembled. Now I'm going to show you each one of these, how they work, and give you just a couple of examples of work holding and honestly why I think this is a really good system. All right, so first let's start with the edge guides. They've got 3 of them in the kit. And you'll see on this back edge, we've got a little bit of a lip there. That lip is meant to catch on the edge of your spoil board, so you can sort of create this internal origin as a starting point for your work. So as I slide this one in, I'm engaged with these 2 grooves. It gives you about 1 inch of movement one way or the other. And you can see I'm kind of locked on that edge, can't go in any further. So when I feel pretty good about where that is, I could lock that guy down. The way these grip, you don't need a ton of pressure, which is really, really nice. Right, so I've got that one in position. We could lock that down. And then you could just bring in your workpiece and register against that inside corner. The other nice thing about this is you could see this little rabbit here, this little step down, gives you the lowest profile you could possibly get so that you don't have any interaction with the bit. It just gives you a little bit more clearance space as the bit travels past your work so you don't mangle these things any more than you have to. All right, let's start with this guy. This is called the Upupad Clamp. As you approach the work, you can see that little corner there, that little hook. You're gonna wanna grab the workpiece like so, and then you'll be able to clamp it down. Now the thing is, normally, for this to really be the most effective, you need something to support this back end, and that gives you a lot more pressure down on your workpiece. So they include this riser, and you'll notice it looks a little weird because it's actually got a low end and a high end. So if you're doing something very thick, you would want to use the high end, and if you're doing something a little bit thinner, closer to the size of this one, you're going to want to use the low end. If you're doing a very skinny workpiece, you don't need anything at all. So let's go ahead and put that guy in there. And then now, as the clamp engages, I'm going to see everything shift around just a little bit, and then it puts the pressure down where it needs to go. Look at that. That's pretty awesome. All right, so here's the ring clamp, and I'm going to slide this guy right up against till it touches the work. And I don't know if you could see that from here, but there's an unlock and a lock symbol, meaning this is where it's at its skinniest point. And as you rotate this around, you can see it's kind of eccentric. It gets a little bit wider. So the idea being, you go up against your work, you lock this guy down, just to the point that it's snug, and then you just grab these 2 little nubs here and rotate. You see, this can still rotate freely even though this is tightened down. And what you're gonna do is rotate toward your main stop. In this case, I've got my edge guide over there, so I'm gonna rotate toward my edge guide to lock this in place. And that's gonna apply pressure this way and keep things nice and snug. And finally, here comes the ramp clamp. Choo-choo. Right, so this guy puts pressure up against the workpiece as well as down. So imagine we pretty much go right up against the workpiece, and the instructions say bring it back about 1/16 of an inch. So there's just a little bit of a gap there. And I'll tighten this guy into place on our grid. And then now, as I tighten this one down, this clip here is on a ramp. So as pressure comes down, it's bringing this whole piece, these little fingers, like kind of downward at an angle, and applying pressure not just laterally into the other stop, but pressure down to the table, kind of the best of both worlds sort of situation. That's pretty cool. All right, and let me show you one other neat feature of this guy. So let's say you want a little bit of clamping pressure on a corner. Well, check this out. So we're in one of the nearest slots, so we can get as close as we can. And this guy can still pivot. So we can move forward, do the same thing we did before. We'll get as close as is reasonable. We can lock this piece down. So now it doesn't rotate anymore. And then once again, we just tighten this down and apply that pressure inward and down onto a corner. All right, so I gotta say I'm pretty impressed with the work holding here. On my last CNC, I had a couple of basic clamps, and I got into, gosh, I can't remember the name of it. There was some kind of a nylon clamping system that I bought, but I still wound up using a ton of double-sided tape. Now, will that mean with this system that I never have to use double-sided tape? I've got to imagine there are just going to be things I'm going to need to use it, and that's totally fine. But if I can get like 75%, 80% of my work holding done with a system like this, sign me up, because it's convenient, it's easy, and these pieces are made out of sacrificial material. Not that I want to cut into them, but if I do, I would rather sacrifice a little clip here than sacrifice my bit. So, and look, I'm new, I'm going to do it. You guys know I'm gonna do it, but I'll do my best not to. So if you wanna learn more about Microjig's MATCHFIT CNC Workholding System, head to their website. They got a bunch of good information there, and they also have a whole bunch of other products in the MATCHFIT line that I think you're gonna find incredibly useful in your shop, so check them out.